our life is littered with all kinds of avenues for growth and transformation. And in fact, the thing that is right in front of you right now, the most challenging thing in your life right now, whoever you are listening to this, that is where your awakening sequence is currently wanting to kind of come from. So the gene keys reflect like a mirror back to you what it is that you need to be focusing on so that you can ignite that transformation.
There goes a sight from my soul.
Welcome to the Inspired Evolution. And it is an incredible treat to be here today. We have with us Richard Rudd. Richard, how are you?
I'm very happy to be here, Amrit. Lovely to meet you and to meet your audience.
Oh my God, it is such a pleasure for me to have you here for the first time here today. For those tuning into Richard for the first time, in 2019, he was named one of the world's top 100 most spiritual, influential living people. Having drunk the Kool-Aid myself, becoming a Gene Keys guide, so to speak, I would have to contend this. I believe that to be quite conservative. In my personal experience, at the very least, which is something I can speak for, he is one of the top 5 influential people in my own personal life. And I can say that if we were looking amongst the living, I can say that with greater and greater certainty, absolutely. His body of work has had a profound effect on my life. And so he's a teacher, a mystic, an award-winning poet. He's traveled and studied around the world, which has then coalesced into the Gene Keys. It took him 7 years to write the first book and understand its teaching and applications. He continues today to expand the wisdom that was here as a student of the Gene Keys while teaching it all around the world. Richard, welcome here today. It's such a pleasure to have you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Look, I mentioned this earlier, I'm going to struggle today to, like I said, color within the lines because there is so much in the Gene Keys. It is so rich and there is so much that we can unpack and open up to and unfold. But having experienced so much of its work firsthand, there's a really yummy spot for the art of contemplation. Now, there's a gorgeous little book that you've put out in the world. It is 80 pages long as a hard book, but 60 pages, I feel, is actually the heart of actually learning what's in there, and there's some added exercises in there, which isn't a lot, actually, when you start to break it down, which is really a gift, because I think I myself will put my hand up and say sometimes I have the attention span of a demented bull ant. So it's really nice to have something so concise yet so potent, which has been really useful. And I'm going to try and stick to the art of contemplation as a conversation today. So with that in mind, I run the risk of already running out of the lines, but for those that are tuning into your work for the first time, especially in the Uninspired Evolution, we haven't had this conversation a lot about the Gene Keys, except for those that have been coached by myself. What would you say are the Gene Keys?
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of different ways to always answer that question. Just depends on how I'm feeling the day. In a way, they're a kind of technology, and that you can apply to your life, but they're a right brain kind of technology. So the technology is actually us. We're inside us. So they kind of activate the higher components that are inside us. So if you look at us even as as kind of software, or hardware, then by using the Gene Keys, you're literally awakening algorithms inside us that were dormant. And those algorithms lead to transformation, personal transformation. And when I say algorithms, people often don't know what that really means. They're kind of awakening sequences that are embedded inside human beings. And again, when I say awakening sequences, that might also sound mysterious. It means really personal transformation. So our life is littered with all kinds of avenues for growth and transformation. And in fact, the thing that is right in front of you right now, the most challenging thing in your life right now, whoever you are listening to this, that is where your awakening sequence is currently wanting to kind of come from. So the Gene Keys reflect like a mirror back to you what it is that you need to be focusing on so that you can ignite that transformation. Instead of it being something that then weighs you down or is a difficulty or a crisis or a heavy thing, it becomes the opposite. It becomes a launch pad, to something wonderful, something miraculous, something incredible. And that really changes the whole of your life, doesn't it?
It really does. Even just the connotations of invitation, the core fundamental tenet of curiosity that's in there. And yeah, I think one of the earliest, and I'm actually reflecting back as you were giving your response, thank you so much, was you mentioned the word personal, and it continues to blow me away. The different people that I've sat with that have come to this work and literally just done their hologenetic profile. I'll put a link in the show notes for people to be able to go do theirs. And just the intimacy that's already being created between them and a digital screen, which is in many instances more profound than it's ever been between them and a digital screen ever before. I have noticed, it's this really, whoa, and they lean in and it's like, wow, that I just put in my date and my name, like, wait, what? Like that. And it really is a very personal signature and journey that is elicited, through this journey that is the Gene Keys. I guess my next little question would be, do you reflect back? And I guess the question is sort of providing some context. So looking back at the Richard that was potentially 8 to 10 years old, do you ever reflect back on that Richard and say, oh, yep, there are certain elements that Richard has sort of always had that has sort of elicited this body of work into the world? Do you look back at some of those, and can you provide us some context?
I think sometimes, or even a bit younger,
please.
I kind of, I was, I had a very privileged childhood in a way. So, although there were difficulties, I was very joyous, I think, and as young children can be, given the right conditions. And I think enough of that sort of has stayed through my life. And so I was able to kind of rekindle a lot of that natural joy, and bring it into these teachings. Because I think, that was why, to keep it simple, because in a way as I started by saying, we are the technology, and we're very focused on everything out there, all the technology out there and how wonderful it is, and but it doesn't, it improves our kind of quality of life in some respect, but in other respects it can easily take away our quality of life, in that simplicity of the joyousness of a human being. So humans, the indigenous people, for example, who live close to the earth, who don't have very much technology, even though they may struggle in many ways, when you meet them and you spend time with them, there's a natural joyousness that's there, and that's in every human being, and it's the child inside us, and that eternal child, and if we can find that in modern life, that's an incredible thing to find, and if we can, like a plant, water that again and help that inner child to grow, and because it's so easily lost. It's the bottom of most agendas, that level of innocent freedom. I mean, we look for it, we search for it in so many places and ways, and yet here it is, always there. How can we remember that as many times as possible in our day? That's really what I came to for myself, so I used myself as a first student, as you said, an example. Like, I wanted, because there were times in my life where I just completely lost my way, and I wanted to have a reminder that helped me kind of get through some of those difficult periods, and then really kind of set that inner child glowing again, on fire, a bright fire, so that fire wouldn't go out easily again. And I think that's that's what the gene keys are for, in a way. They're here to kind of kindle that fire in us, and in lots of different ways, as you said, lots of different avenues.
Yeah.
But it's all the same reason underneath, you know. Yeah.
And so on that journey, you've obviously come across or fallen into or acquainted yourself with this path of contemplation. When did you first recognize contemplation as a practice, is the way I'm going to word that question, because I'm sure you'll probably, in some ways I feel, yeah, I should just ask the question and leave it alone. But really, contemplation is something that oftentimes we think we're doing a lot of the time just in our everyday. Like, people do sort of associate themselves with the word contemplation, but as we're going to find out in this podcast, the art of contemplation is quite the art. When did you find yourself practicing contemplation, and kind of what was the context that then built into that you felt?
Yeah, well,
some of the major milestones. Yeah.
I think like many of us, I took, young, in my 18 years old or something, I started to be curious about spiritual things. And so, and I traveled and journeyed around the world. But I was lucky enough to be able to do that. And studied lots of different things with different teachers and things. And I did lots of yoga and the meditation and retreats and all those sort of things, and studied with great teachers. And through all that period of my life, I kind of tried all these different things, like, traditional Vipassana meditations from the Buddhist traditions, and yogic techniques and things, and all those sort of things. And after a certain amount of time, I think when you're on that path, you settle into your own kind of way. And it took a while. Takes a long time, I think, to mature, to find your own way, because there's all this, we're trying these things, and then eventually, you discover that no matter how great those teachers or teachings are, or how much they work for another person, you have to eventually settle with your way and trust in your way. And that means sometimes you have to leave teachers, which I've had to do, and leave teachings and disappoint people, and because you have to be true to your own way. And I came to my way, which I call the way of contemplation, or the art of contemplation, because I wanted a word really that signified the way that I was on. And it was very broad and quite simple. And I also noticed it, a lot of other people seem to be on a similar one, so I think that more of us are contemplative people than we realize, so they are, as you said, many of us are doing the art of contemplation or following it. And because it's a very, and contemplation can include meditation, and it can include yogic techniques, and it can include just about anything.
Prayer,
any tool that we pick up and we want to use for self-awareness or growth, that is contained within the arena of contemplation. So contemplation it's not just, you might think, oh, it's just thinking about things deeply, and that's one tiny part of it. It's an art. I call it the art of contemplation, because an art requires mastery over a long period of time, and it's not about techniques only. There are techniques, but the techniques are they're just to get you into the space of contemplation. It really, it's contained in the etymology of the word, in a way. It means, con means to go with, and then, or to go into, and then templum is the inner temple, the temple. So it means to come inside one's own temple, and that's what it is. It is the inner journey. So the art of contemplation is a broad way of seeing, oh wow, I have my own way, and it's filled with all kinds of things, and it's changing as well. So today I pick up this technique, I may have used this one, I may be using only one technique, I may be using many, I may not be using any techniques. All of that is my contemplative arena. But the thing that we all have in common is that we're all looking inwardly. That's what it is. We're all going into this inner space and finding something in there, and it's challenging also going in, because we do find stuff in there. We find difficult things inside, and that's where it kind of begins in a way. That's what the Gene Keys help us. Like, they help us to begin with looking at the shadow, looking at the discomforts that are inside us, and that's, in a way, sorry, I'll finish that. That's why, in a way, meditation can be very uncomfortable especially for Westerners, because when we slow down enough to just sit still and close our eyes and go inside, we immediately are confronted with our intense restlessness and discomfort, because we haven't been leading a contemplative life. If you then are able to live and start living a contemplative life, and we can talk about that, what that looks like, then it's a hell of a lot easier just to drop into that meditative space when and as you need to. And you don't actually have to do it in any traditional way either. It can be a moving thing. It doesn't have to be a formal thing. It can be, but it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's pick on that thread of what we think it looks like. Because you mentioned earlier on in that piece, which is that many people that you noticed are potentially already doing it in some way. And I felt myself in this, even in this modern world, and we do run the risk of making it sound and look somewhat monastic, in the description of consistently. But even just the simple effect of me picking a particular topic, watching the certain challenges that my life is presenting, and just circulating YouTube videos again and again and again and again, and reading books again and again on that particular topic, to really try and infuse that wisdom, and then sort of reflecting on what I've written, what I've watched, what I've read, and just allowing that to sort of stew and brew, was something that I was doing prior to coming to the Gene Keys. However, having a bit more of a formula around, or even just labeling it as a path, has really been quite heart-opening and heartwarming, to sort of know that I'm not just sort of like rattling around. So yeah, you articulated that potentially we can unpack what it looks like. Because I know that I'm sometimes contemplating when I'm filling in the gas, So it doesn't necessarily have to be a monastic lifestyle at all. I'll leave you to answer the question. Yeah, please.
Yeah, no, it can be very ordinary, and it can be extraordinary. I think, I identified in my little book there two real ways in which you can steer your contemplation. One is what you said. It's like, if you have a conundrum or a challenge or a difficulty or something that's really hurting or causing you pain, that is an excellent thing to contemplate, because then you're going towards it rather than trying to distract yourself away from it. And so opening up to that, even just the act of saying, I am going to consciously look into this, I'm going to be with it. I mean, I remember the great teacher Ramdas, lovely man, saying one day, where he was describing making friends with his neuroses, his various neuroses. And he said, I invite them in for tea. When I meet one, I say, come on in and have a seat and come and have a cup of tea with me. And then he's like, I really like that, because it's like he's sitting next to his neuroses, but it's not like overpowering him. He's just
he doesn't have to
looking at it
identify
and
with
going,
it.
and he's sort of going, okay, let's get to know each other a little bit. and then it's gone, and another one comes. But in a way, that attitude is the contemplative attitude. It creates a space, a certain vacancy. I don't mean that in like an emptiness, but a spaciousness inside us, so that we can look at it. And even like on the front of the book, you see like there's all these dots, and there's one in the middle, and it's like we create that space like a big still lake. We put all that space inside us, and then in the middle we drop this one pebble, and that pebble is the thing that's troubling us. And then we look at the ripples and we learn from them, and we really examine them, but we have to create that space for it first. And as you said, that space can be while you're filling up the gas. It can be when you're doing it's going about your daily thing. But you know, whatever it is you do, no matter how busy you are, you can still be contemplating something in the background of your unconscious. So you begin with a process and you say, I'm going to look at this. And then you start the journey, and then you forget about it, and then it comes back, and then you talk it through, you self-reflect, you use a tool, you know, whether you're using Gene Keys or anything else, and you keep looking at it over time. And that's what does the magic. You have to stay with it. You know, another story I told once was a Zen master I was with, a Western Zen master, and I don't remember his name because I was younger, but he was holding this little Victorian ring case, you know, those lovely wedding rings and things.
Oh,
Used
yes.
to come in these lovely little cases. They still do probably. And the old ones, the Victorian ones, had all these like folds of velvet on them and stuff, and you pick them up. And he was holding this ring case, and it was because they're closed, right? And you can't, and the little button that opens it is hidden somewhere in the folds. And so he's holding this ring case, and he's just kind of caressing it as he's talking. And he's going, I know there's a treasure in here. And I'm just like holding it and caressing it. And suddenly his finger lights on that tiny little button, and he presses it. And then ping, it opens up, and there's this beautiful ring in there. And he said that was his way of describing the art of contemplation, because we take that thing and then we caress it, but we don't really know how and when it's going to open and show its secrets. But we're doing that in our everyday life, and we're just kind of holding a focus, but gently and playfully even, you know, so that we're allowing ourselves to forget about it, because we don't, you know, even when we go about our daily life, it's still there in the back of our unconscious. And it's often when we're busy doing something else, and then we suddenly stop and there's a pause or a gap, then it pops up, and possibly an insight then occurs. And that's the first stage of contemplation, insight. When an insight comes, you're like, and it comes usually suddenly, you're like, oh, I'd never seen it like that.
Yeah.
You know, I'd never seen my crisis in that way, for example. And then that little shift begins to kind of open up more and more of inner revelations or wisdom that's inside us, you know. And that's the magical process of the art of contemplation, that it's a path of wisdom, you know, and it is the path of wisdom, because we have huge amounts of wisdom inside us, and we're looking out there always for wisdom. Someone like out there, or someone with a teaching or something, you know. And actually it's really, there's a vast store of wisdom inside every human being. So you need a tool that points you inwards, so that wisdom will emerge. But it won't emerge under any pressure. This is what I've realized. I mean, there may be techniques, you know, like there are more yogic techniques which apply vast pressure, you know, ascetic techniques, right? That's not my way, or the way of contemplation. The way of contemplation is gentle.
It is.
You know, it's gentle and very patient. And gentleness and patience are what actually create that space, that spaciousness, so that whatever it is that's inside us can emerge in its own time and in its own way. And that's really the practice.
I love it. And it's super inviting. For those that are tuning in for the first time to the practice, maybe feeling that resistance to actually looking inwards, especially when, with the example we took, because you mentioned there's two paths, and there is looking at the challenges in your life, but then also the aspirations and the inspirations that help you inspire and draw breath and pull you forward in life. But for specifically staying with the tangent of currently, you know, facing up to our challenges, for some people it's quite confronting and the invitation is not super present. What do you say to those people, Richard, to encourage them to have a look inwards and be with the uncomfortable stuff?
It's like, you know, these things, these discomforts in our life, these challenges are actually in the body. They're in the physical body, and we don't often realize that. You know, they come up and we feel them move through our nervous system, and then they become worries and anxieties and quiverings, and you know, and they become, you know, really difficult health problems, like, you know, after a while, and addictions and all kinds of patterns, you know, that we have. And so they're in the physical body, they're in the DNA, And that's why my system called the gene keys, because it's all in our DNA. So if there's trauma patterns deeply kind of embedded in our DNA at some place, and they doesn't, we don't actually have to know how they got there. They probably got there in our childhood, or possibly, if you want to be mystical, that we even carry them from our ancestry, some of the deeper ones, and so the question is like how to approach them. And it's like like they're wounds in a way, and I would approach them in the same way as one might approach a wounded animal, because that's what we are. We're kind of wounded animals. And so when you approach a wounded animal, you approach quietly, gently, with imagine a little puppy that's just kind of terrified, or has just kind of speared itself on something, and it's kind of going whimpering stuff. You don't rush up to it. You go really quietly and gently and really help it to feel safe. And then it starts to trust you, and then you can hold it and you can take care of it. And that's us. We have to approach ourselves like that, and our body like that. So we need practices that help us to take care of our body, take care of our emotions, take care of ourselves. And that begins with us doing it. That begins with us taking care of ourselves, taking care of our bodies. Really. So, when we start down that path, it's really powerful, because for many of us, we haven't been doing that. We're so distracted out there that we've forgotten just to take really good care of ourselves. And so there's so many ways in which we might begin that journey, whether it's booking a massage, or whether it's taking up yoga, or whether it's literally just lying on our bed with our hands on our belly and just breathing and just going, I'm okay, or whatever it is. Whatever way you take care, it might be taking a hot bath, in the middle of the day, or it might be whatever you need for yourself, whatever your body needs, so that it can feel like you're taking care of it. That self-care is the very beginning of how we create the space for contemplative healing, and contemplation is not the same as therapy. It is therapeutic, but it's not the path of therapy. It might involve therapy, and therapists, but it's wider. It's very therapeutic, but it's bigger. It's bigger than just that. It's self-care, and that has to begin sort of in our soul, really. It's a decision that we have to take in our soul. I am going to take care of myself right now. From this day forward, I'm going to start, and that means, yes, I have got problems. I have got issues. I'm going to look at them. I'm going to tackle them. I'm going to get help. Often that's what it is I'm going to find help. I'm going to ask for support. I'm going, and then we go out, and that's part of our journey is asking for support and help, whether it's professional, whether it's, wherever it comes from. Might be our friends, might be just opening up to someone in a way that we never have before. But it starts with us, doesn't it? Like, it starts with us taking care of ourselves. And so I want people to really get that contemplation is not complicated. It's literally, it's self-love, self-respect, self-esteem, rebuild self-esteem. How to rebuild self-esteem. That's going to take a while. You have to be patient with yourself. You go, okay, I'm not going to get a quick fix here. No one's going to suddenly save me. It's going to take a while. So I'm here for the long term, and that's why all my work with the gene keys and all of it, it's like all based on time, and patience. You got to realize that you don't get a quick fix. These are old wound patterns, and they won't go away quickly. But ironically, they'll go, the gentler and the more patient you are, the quicker they will kind of come to resolution. So it's a very sweet journey to be on. Very easy. There's no one that can't do it. There's no one that can't begin it. Contemplation is for everyone. It doesn't require you sit in a dark room on your own and do something really difficult. No, it really doesn't.
The timepiece is a really interesting reflection. I was reflecting back when I signed up for my first online virtual retreat with the Gene Keys, and it was like 4 months to do 4 different keys. And I was like, come on, man, I can read 4 chapters in a night. I look back at that and I was like, I can read 4 chapters in a night. What are we doing 4 months and 4 keys? And then I still remember the pivot when it was like I was going through it. And after the first month, the second key had rolled around, and I was like, "No, I'm not ready for the second key yet."
Found your rhythm.
So yeah, the taking the time and the patience is definitely a real. It's actually a really yummy piece.
It's joyous. It is so joyous. You know, when you are able to slow down inside yourself, your breathing deepens, your mind clears, you know, all the things that you've dreamed of, like, begin to occur. Your heart softens and opens, and you start to feel at peace again. And it is not rocket science. It never has been. You know, we are told that this is going to take you, you know, 20 years in a monastery, or, you know, doing this technique, and, you know, and you're like, this is really, you know, actually a lot of the time it's just about, you know, pausing in your everyday life more often, doing things for yourself, perhaps being in nature, paying attention to nature. There's lots of really great invitations, like in the back of my little book, there's lots of like little invitations of like, here's some things you might like to do that are just so simple and so obvious that none of us ever do them. Like one of them is like, sorry, I'll give you an example, and then you can tell me one of your favorites. Please. But one of my favorites is involving light. You know, the contemplative way is all connected to light and the kind of moving of light in our life. So the sun and the moon and the stars. And a lot of the time we don't give ourselves the space to spend time in those special lights. So the special lights are dawn or dusk, or moonlight or starlight or candlelight or firelight. You know, all those different lights, those are crepuscular lights, you know, because they're borderland lights. And when we spend time, even like half an hour, just sitting in that with a candle flame, and, you know, it increases that it's something in our brain that immediately relaxes and feels at peace. Or starlight, you know, moonlight, it begins a process inside us that enhances contemplation. And it's as simple as that. Like, so if you know, even if you live in the city, and the busiest time of day is often either early in the morning or late at night in the evening, as night is falling. And, you know, if you were to go outside in a park and watch night fall, I tell you, you'll be like, wow, why don't I do this every day? I feel so good after doing that. And it's a very simple thing that, you know, contemplation requires very simple things in order for us, and they're littered throughout our everyday life. That's just one example. What have you found ways that you?
Yeah, there's two in particular that have really hit me in the sweet spot recently. Lingering is one. Lingering is one that you mentioned, and yeah, just taking that extra.
Tell us what lingering is for you.
So lingering is. It's really easy, actually. Like, I'll go along to an event, or I'll be sitting with someone and, you know, we'll be having a conversation, or I'll be at an event. I've been networking with a bunch of people. And towards the end, like, every invitation is for me to leave. And yeah, I won't. I'll just sort of stay, and I'll stay in the energy of the space for a little bit longer. I'll look at a painting on the wall. I'll just sort of linger. And there's every impulse to sort of get away and do the next thing. And the mind's like, yep, come on, hurry up. Off you go, Amrit. Come on, chop, chop. And it's like, yeah, I see ya. But this was really sweet. And it's almost like, you know, when you take that bite of the apple and you're always doing it, but then when you do the mindful exercise of like sort of chewing it and savoring it, the lingering has been an invitation to savor moments to a great deal. And then what I find is, And we'll talk about pausing and insight and the relationship between the two. But I do find that it gives me this opportunity for things to sort of, I don't want to say crescendo in, but sort of come together in a really nice way instead of me just flicking off onto the next thing. So lingering has been a really, really powerful one. And also noticing I'm an engineer by qualification, so I always look for efficiencies. Yeah, it's just like everything is efficiencies. And there's always like to get from A to B the most efficient way. And one of the invitations in the book is to take the long way round. And it's been real medicine.
Long cut.
Yeah, the long the long cut instead of the shortcut. And it's been real medicine actually to sort of go, you know what? I'm gonna go the wrong way to go the right way for a little bit, and just sort of watch everything that comes up, but then also the space and the time that it affords me. And even like you mentioned, it's a subtle thing, but the relationship that it builds with myself, that I'm worth the scenic route, or that I'm worth a little bit extra of my time to be spent with me, to be enjoying the time that I'm spending with myself, and that I'm not just the doer, I'm also being and enjoying my being. Those are two that have, yeah, really been very present for me.
Those are lovely. Yeah, I
Yeah,
love those.
yeah.
I
So
mean, I
thank
love
you.
the simplicity of them as well,
Yeah.
because anyone can do those things.
Mm.
And actually, and you talk about efficiency, slowing down actually creates more efficiency. It's a paradox.
This is probably one of the biggest things I have gotten from the art of contemplation, Richard. Please, if you could expand on that, because I would love to share my thoughts on this after
Yeah.
you.
Well, it's like the fundamental the only thing you really need to know, and if there's nothing else you remember from this talk, then let it be this, that the foundation of the art of contemplation is pausing, the ability to pause. And the more pauses that we have in our everyday life, the more relaxed we will feel. And a pause can be literally just a breath. It can be as short as a breath. It can be that is a perfect pause, right? And then there are longer pauses, like you mentioned, lingering, where you're deliberately kind of milking the aftermath of something, or an event, or a dinner, or something, or wherever you are, and you linger there and there's magic that occurs in that moment where things have ended, but they haven't. And so pausing becomes like a really important, powerful thing. And I talk about it as harvesting pauses, in our everyday life, because they're there already. And so we have to find them, and they're coming to us all the time from, life, especially in between different tasks that we're doing. So when you finish a task, it's like you were saying, like there's a possibility of a pause between this task and the next task. And that pause, you could do lots of choices. There are things you could do. But if you run straight to the next task without having a pause, and a pause might be a conversation with someone, it might be time spent with one of your friends, it might be like, oh, I've got a spare 5 minutes. Do you want to just hang out? Have a cup of tea, whatever. Like it, or it's those simple things. Or the friend of mine, or not friend, but the guy I met who read my book and is a New York cab driver, and said it changed his life, because every time now he comes to a red light, he's like, a pause. Instead of like going, come on, I want to get on,
Yeah.
he's like, wow, the pauses are everywhere.
I found it.
So it's about harvesting them and noticing them, and becoming a real hunter for them in a way, so that you find, and the more you find, this is the paradox, is you would think that would kind of, you'd be taking up more time in your day, but actually what you're doing is you're pumping more time into your day. It's a strange thing. It's like you're pumping this time into your day, and when you get to the end of a day that's had lots of pauses, you feel really relaxed. You feel like it was a good day. A day without any pauses, you just hit the sack and you're like exhausted, and you have no place for like what happened today. You're just on to the next day. Right. So pausing is a really powerful practice. It always has been. It's, many, many cultures have have kind of harnessed it, and it's there. Like if you get the most relaxed people are the people who are pausing often, who are hanging out together under the tree talking. They're not always working. They're not always obsessed with activity, and by the way, pauses can also be activity. So a run can be a pause, a swim can be a pause. Pauses can be moving as well, because it's about the quality of our awareness. That's what a pause is. The quality of our awareness is that we are actually mindful when we're pausing, and so it can be many things. And it's also kind of fun looking for them, so there can be a playfulness about, I haven't paused, for a while, and you suddenly remember and you're like, oh yeah, I'm tired, I need to kind of stop. And then you stop for a moment. It really doesn't matter what you do in that stop or for how long you pause, but that's such a powerful practice that alone can transform a person's life completely in mysterious ways. And what you find is that you come into rhythm. You come into, there's a rhythm that all life operates in on this earth. Some people call it, the Schumann resonance they talk about, which is the resonance of Gaia. It's a frequency. And so when you pause often, because nature pauses often, you look, you watch nature, anyone, like you watch nature, you watch any insect, you watch any bird, animal, leaf, anything, the wind, everything, it just sort of, everything just comes to a stop every now and again. Everything. Like watch a fly. It comes and it lands on you. And it's like, you brush it away, and as it comes back, you're like, why is it doing that? It's like it comes and it just pauses on you. And animals do it, everything. So everything is in this pausing natural rhythm, because if you don't pause, you don't hear, you don't survive, you don't thrive. Like animals pause because they then become super aware of their environment. They hear, their senses are tuned. So it's actually a survival thing as well as thriving. And it's part of finding rhythm. So when a human pauses in their everyday life, we come into a different rhythm. We come into a more natural flowing rhythm. And then out of that natural flowing rhythm, our decisions flow more clearly. Our mind is clearer. Our words come out in the right timing and cadence, and way. Our emotions are more kind of rhythmic as well, rather than more tempestuous and kind of overwhelming. So everything, our whole biosystem starts to come into flow. And that's what pausing does. It brings us into flow. And that's beautiful. That's simple. Anyone can do that.
Couple of things in there. So point 1 of the art of contemplation, step 1, pillar 1 is to pause for those tuning in. And then also one of the key things you'll notice within the art of contemplation, what we've been discussing, meditation, even therapy, filling up the gas, taking these moments to pause in the car. These are all moments that we can take, like opportunities to pause, whether it's going for a run, going for a walk. A pause can look just about anything. And it is literally as simple as just stopping to take a breath, to sigh. It can be a micro pause, a macro pause, anything that, like you said, is like a conscious moment to drop in and look inwards with yourself. For me, it's been really, really yummy as a practice. And the piece about going slow to go fast, I did write a poem about it, but I'm too nervous too shy to share it. But something about the element of, just allowing yourself to pause. Then oftentimes my pauses are associated, I notice, with a sigh. It's like the minute I pause, I sigh. And you mentioned this in the book, which is just like, you'll notice it's your nervous system just going, oh yeah, we're back, And from there, knowing, everything within me knows that I've got to clear ahead from that place. And from there, I just have better decision making. And I'm going to go twice as fast. Like, just take a second to pause, to go faster. Even my left brain logic can really sink into that and really start to convince itself that this is a practice for me. And then the heart of it really, when I was reading the book the first time, I remember just how much that spoke to me. Like, I almost like, you have those slap yourself in the face moments, which is the nature piece, which is like, it's still like, yes, I'd like the minute the book said, like, just like you articulated, everything in nature pauses all the time. And like my mind was like, yeah, I remember all the time that I've witnessed something in nature stop and just pause. Happens all the time. The wind, the animals, it's happening all the time. And it was just like a real invitation. Oh, that's your natural nature. Like that's an invitation there. So we've discussed pausing as the fundamental sort of hallowed ground to start the path of contemplation with. There is a gift that emerges from pausing, which is insight. Would you love to sort of describe how that may potentially emerge from pausing? How the gift of insight emerges?
Yeah, there's a lovely word that in Japanese they call it satori, from Zen, and satori is a lovely word because, and we call it insight, and that's one way of translating it. But you could also look at it as a breakthrough or a kind of inner opening. There was one translation, light flashed through the mind. I like that one. Light flashing through the mind, a kind of illumination lit up from within. And so in those pauses, we can have pivotal experiences. So the more pauses we create in our month, let's say, the more chance there is that in one of those pauses, one of these magical moments of grace will occur to us. And grace is something that's outside of our experience of understanding. It's beyond the logic of the left brain. It is something spontaneous, mysterious. It's a part of nature as well. That every now and again, in a pause, a moment of grace happens to us. And that moment of grace could be many different things. If we're contemplating some difficult aspect of our nature, and we're doing that on an ongoing basis, as we discussed earlier, in one of those moments where you've forgotten about it, suddenly something comes up. It might be a memory. It might be someone comes to you and says something and looks in your eye. It might be a stranger. It could be any event that is outside of your control that occurs, that triggers a moment of spontaneous inner revelation, where probably you will either have a big insight about your life, or you might find yourself in tears of kind of release or joy, or you might just feel lit up from inside in some way, or quite ecstatic. That joy of your childhood suddenly re-emerges, like in a rush or a breakthrough, or we call them pivotal moments. And they're really powerful, and you can't predict them, and you can't create them. All you can do is create the conditions for them to possibly occur. And if you create enough conditions, they will occur. They will, and it's a wonderful practice, and so that's really the more magical part of this. And I mean, I always think we should bring this into the business world, because I'd like to instigate paid to pause. I think people should be paid to pause. I mean, I like to tell Elon Musk this, right?
Yeah.
Because like all those people that are driving, you've got to work more, you've got to work more hours. Like the opposite is the truth. Like the more people pause, the more efficient they become, the more relaxed they become, the more joyful they become, the more the culture of the place they're working in becomes easier. And then the more efficient the whole team becomes, so that instead of being driven by this left brain, we're relaxing more into the mystery of the right brain. And then we open up to these magical breakthroughs where a whole team starts to kind of come together in coherence. And there's no way you could engineer that unless you create those conditions of like easiness. I'm not saying doing nothing. I'm not saying no boundaries. I'm just saying an easeful feeling, a feeling of freedom and creativity and flow. And that's what creates coherence in groups, spontaneously. And that's where you get really powerful breakthroughs. That's where genius starts to emerge from that space. So it's incredible what contemplation can lead to. Anyway, so that, I hope that kind of answers that question.
I love that. And then, like you said, the pivoting is one of the second big, is a big part of the emotional aspect of mentally pausing, allowing ourselves to pause emotionally, going through a pivot. And then the breakthrough that emerges on the other side of that is, through, and like you said, we can't really engineer a pivot, but what we can do is, like you said, harvest the pauses and allow those moments to be possible. And it becomes a matter of odds. I remember when I first started my practice of meditation, I would sort of connect to the feeling of like I was meditating 1 in 5 times. And I remember teaching people meditation, and then they would say, "Oh, I'm not getting it, and I only get it every now and then." And maybe I was just the right kind of kooky for meditation. But what I found was I was just excel. Like for me, it was like, okay, I've just got to sit those 4 times, get them in. Do you know what I mean? So I can get to that 5th time, which is when I feel like I really connect, which is, 1 in every 5-ish. I sort of felt something. And I was just hungry to get those 4 under my belt and out of the way so I could connect for that really yummy time. And I know that there's no formula for pausing. And I don't want to say it happens 1 in 5, you'll get a pivot, but it's almost like an encouragement to, just cultivate those pauses to allow yourself to pivot, to ultimately break through and then allow things to really embody into your life. Now, this became a really, it's very intuitive reading through the book in terms of how you can understand this to be the way when you go from pausing to pivoting and having a breakthrough to then merging. But when you look at it from the outside, they do look like these very sort of 2 ends of a straw almost, because you've gone from something that was the world of ideas, which is when you've got an idea, to pause and just take a moment to slow down my mental state, and cultivating more of those through time allows you to pivot, have breakthroughs, move through stuff, and then it starts to actually shift. Like you said, your physical world, the way you show up in the world, you're slower, you're connected to the biorhythms of the world. You approach problems very differently. You sit back, you allow yourself sometimes 24 hours, I do anyway now, 24 hours to really allow the problem to sink in before I start making hasty decisions. My decision making is much more different. I've merged with knowing that, my initial response is anger or frustration when the sort of problem is first presented, and now I no longer even just engage with it. I just sort of step back, and that's, for me, was what I'd identified as a bit of an epiphany and a realization for myself, and allowing the wisdom to sort of merge into the 3D. I have my own awareness of merging, but can you tell us a little bit about how you see that sort of journey going from pause? You've mentioned pivoting, coming home all the way through to merging. I know, once again, we can't engineer it. And you mentioned that in the book as well. So it's a difficult topic to talk about, but can you elaborate on it a little bit for us?
I'll do my best. I think, you have these 3 stages, and they're kind of inside each other: pausing, pivoting, merging. And the merging is really not something that kind of happens. It's already there. We all, we hear these things like we already are one, we already are merged in the field, the unified field of consciousness. And so this is really a bit more mystical, but it's also very physical, because, again, as I said, it's in our physical body that we, it's really about utter relaxation. Like, as we kind of weed out some of the traumas that we carry through this very simple practice of pausing and then having these pivotal experiences, every time we have one of those, it's like a weed has been pulled out of the garden, of our inner garden. And so there's more space when a weed is pulled out, and then and in that, and the more space we're creating inside us, the more we come into realization of what we really are. That we are not just a sort of body moving through time and space. We're actually, there's a lot more behind us, underneath us. There's a spiritual kind of truth moving through us. And that's what the merging refers to. I think it's most often experienced as love, actually. I think it's experienced as a feeling of love and connectedness to life. Not even like emotional love, I'm not talking about sentimental love. I'm talking about the kind of feeling that you're part of life and that this is your home and that this body is your home, and you feel at home in your home, and you feel at home in the, even within the kind of chaos of humanity, because because your roots are growing deep. And this is what I mean when I said, like, when you spend time with people who live very closely to the earth, without mechanization in the way, then that's the feeling that you get. You get this feeling of like, wow, they have a sort of relaxedness about them. And that's us. We are those people, all of us. So we're actually just returning to our true nature as humans, humans who are, we're heart. The human heart is beautiful and simple. We're simple beings, ultimately. Actually, we have we have so many capacities, but actually, what we're really seeking in life is this simplicity of being. It's our highest aspiration in some respect, because even though we create all these complex things and they're very impressive and all that, the only place we feel truly at home is just in this moment, relaxed in this body, being me, being, it's sort of simple mysticism of just, there's nothing complicated about it. And so we become more stable, really. We find a deep stability in our being, in our body, in our, and a sense of ease. And out of that, we become more like a child again. We started talking about the inner child, and this is like we return to that kind of inner child, but the child is protected by the adult now. So, and the adult knows how to take care of that child, and so we become a whole human being. That's what this is really about, becoming whole again, and healed in that sense. And then we can just live our lives, whatever they are. It doesn't really matter, because we have a deep sense of purpose of being here. And also, I think we feel a sense of our eternity, and that's the slightly mystical side of it. It's like, the more we feel at home here as a human, the more we realize we aren't human only, that we are we have an eternal nature. There's a part of us that never dies, that can never die, that has never died, that's eternal. Wow. When one experiences that, I mean, that's like epiphany, that's self-realization, that's enlightenment, that's whatever word you want to give it. It's that true memory of what we truly are. We are the whole. We are the divine. We are, all those words we give it, we are love. That's an experience that isn't as far away as everyone makes out. In fact, it's so close that all it requires is a very simple kind of set of algorithms, for us. Pause, pause often, and you'll begin to come and find yourself. There was an old saying, wasn't there, with in a Zen story or something, where the young monk is kind of running towards his master or something, and his master says, you need to slow down. And then he says, what do you mean, master? You need to slow down because enlightenment isn't ahead of you, it's behind you. Only when you slow down enough will it catch you up. So that's it.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's a whole piece in there about simplicity, and it really is one of the most gorgeous things, in my humble opinion, about the Gene Keys, and this work and the art of contemplation. And I'll be completely transparent with you, Richard. One of my findings on this journey that I've been on for quite some time now pales in comparison to how long you've been on this path, nonetheless. But I'm still, one of the mantras I've almost created for myself is, if it's complicated, someone's really just trying to sell me something. Like, it's really what I've come to terms with. Like, oh, that sounds wonderfully complicated. My mind is really soaking in that now, and I can see all the steps and the pieces and the bits and the bobs and the mechanisms, and it's like, okay, what's really trying to be sold to me here? And then, yeah, I always come back to, simplicity is really, the natural order of things. And the mind necessarily doesn't, or the mind is also an interesting conversation we can have today, actually, and I probably will use that segue before I forget it, is one of the realizations following your work is also the mind we often locate within the brain for a lot of people. And yet you've encouraged, or at least myself, potentially the community around the Gene Keys, if they've tuned into this level of work, but that we are within the mind, and that the mind is in fact a field. Can you unpack that teaching a little bit further?
Well, sure. I mean, yeah, it's an ancient way of looking at mind. They had a word for it in the Vedas called manas. And, it's this field, the quantum field, you could say, is what physicists are looking at, the quantum field, or the dark matter, the thing that interconnects everything. That is the mind, the world mind. And we're a receiver of that mind. Our receiving dish is up here. So we set the frequency that we receive. So if we tune our radio to a high frequency, then we will receive high frequency energies, and high frequency insights. And if we set it to low frequency, if we're kind of in a victim pattern, then we will draw in victim patterns. We will draw in relationships that are based on those belief systems that we have unconscious often. And so it's how our mind sees things that is kind of critical to the life that swirls around us, and the people that we attract, and the events and the things. And that doesn't mean that if something bad happens to us, it's because we had a bad thought. It's not as simple as that. Because sometimes things happen in order to, in fact, everything happens in order to awaken us at some level, right? Everything serves our higher purpose. Ultimately, it's just how deeply are we prepared to journey into that, whatever it is. And so, yeah, our mind it's not just a kind of brain by a computer. It has, it has connections everywhere throughout the universe. We as you said it, we live within the mind. So it's about what do we, this is one of the things you learn with Gene Keys. How do you attune your mind? And the mind does, it does enjoy complexity. And it kind of, in a way, when you come to Gene Keys, one of the first things you see a lot of stuff, and your mind is like, oh my God, how do I, But actually, once you get into the structure of one of the programs, for example, or you start reading one of the books, your mind starts to settle into a rhythm that it can understand insights in sequences, because that's what the mind likes. Generally, the mind feels at ease if it kind of is in a structure that it goes, okay, I can kind of live with it. I can understand that there are stages to this, and and in a way, what we're doing is we're conning the mind. We're tricking the mind into feeling like, yes, there must be some structure to this, so that I can feel safe. And as it starts to feel safe, then the rest of us starts to relax a bit. And again, we open up. Then that's where some of those higher fields become available to us, because we are, we're allowing our mind to go on a journey. So in a way, that's kind of a bit of a trick of the Gene Keys at one level, is it keeps your mind occupied while something else is happening that's more mysterious. One of those insights will come, at a certain point. And many people experience this work or reading, for instance, the Gene Keys book, or which is a big thick book that has lots in it, and people like, deep contemplative journeyers love that book because they can kind of read stuff or open it at random and then read something and then get an insight from that. And it because it has so many layers. But as you said, like, it may look complex, but it's the same thing written in different ways over and over and over again. So the principles are the same and they're very, very simple. But the mind is a complicated creature. So it requires a certain level of structure, I think. I mean, there are people's minds operate in different ways, but I'm talking specifically about the left brain part of the mind, which requires that certain structure so that it can feel at ease. If it's the right brain, and many people are more right, women, for example, tend to be more right-brained than men, then they won't require as much of that structure, and they can free range through ideas and things in a way that, I'm not just saying women, I'm saying the right brain itself is much more free range, and is more in tune with wisdom than knowledge. So it can grasp things quicker, because it's intuitive. So it can grasp entire concepts without having to work through all the mechanics of it.
And the steps.
So but the two together, working together, that's the ultimate. And in a way, that's what I try to create with the Gene Keys is journeys for both sides of our being. So that we have a kind of something for everyone.
I will talk about the Gene Keys book in my last question, but my penultimate question for the day is about gentleness. There is no way I'm letting you out of here today without talking about gentleness, because this has been a real edge for me personally, and it has been really yummy. It's been really, really awesome to sort of just allow myself to embrace gentleness, especially with, and I'm just going to go there, with sort of the connotation of where society places young men, I feel, at this real raw, like sort of edge. And I do embrace that sort of sun and lion very, very dearly within my being. And yet noticing that there is this real invitation, especially as I'm maturing, becoming a father, getting older, to realize that you can't burn the candle at both ends, but probably, and that there is a bit more equanimity to be walked within life. And this gentleness is really present for me right now. I'll get you to unpack I'll get you to unpack gentleness for us a little bit, please. And and its importance in the way of this work.
Well, I once asked a dear friend of mine, I said, he was in his 80s, and I said, what's it like being old? And he said, it's wonderful. He said, it's wonderful. He said that the benefits far outweigh the negatives. He said that, and I said, what's the best benefit? And he said, I'm so much easier on myself than I ever was. And I thought, I felt so warmed by hearing that. And he said, because humans, we're so hard on ourselves, we're so hard on ourselves. And so when I talk of gentleness, it's really the first kind of universal law of self-love is that we have to, like I said earlier, we have to learn to be gentle with ourselves. And it's a discipline, actually, gentleness. Gentleness is a kind of hard task.
It's a strict discipline, actually.
It's one of those paradoxes, right? Because you've got to kind of keep remembering and just oh God, there I go again. And the other irony is that when you're really gentle with yourself, you can be quite fierce with others. Because sometimes your gentleness towards yourself requires you put up a boundary towards someone who's behaving a certain way towards you and not respecting you. And so gentleness is about finding our self-respect. So it often has the opposite effect, than you might imagine, because it's about standing up for oneself and standing in your truth. And the other side to it, of course, is that, is that you can apply it, in situations, in relationships, and it's, it is the great door opener, right? It has to be genuine. And I was talking with my wife recently about because I was going to go and talk to a group of parents, and I said, I don't know what shall I say to them. They're all going to want advice from me. And I brought up 3 children, but I said, I don't know what hell I'm going to say. She said, look, it's a spectrum, isn't it? How you treat your children. You either, and it's paradox. It's how we treat ourselves. You either, you've got discipline on one side, and then you've got freedom on the other. And it's a line, like, if you've got to tread that line, but if you go too far one way, you kind of lose the child. They begin to wobble, or rebel, So too much discipline, they rebel. Too much freedom without boundaries, and they just kind of drift, and they lose themselves. And so you've got to have the middle line. But what my wife said is that the most important thing I ever learned is that you want to shift the dial more in the direction of freedom than it is in discipline. That was such a great tip. She said, look, it's not a straight line, but if you want to be successful and you want to have a good life and you want these children to grow up well, tip it a little bit more in the direction of freedom, because you can't, because yes, you'll, if you tip too far in the discipline way, you're going to lose them, and so it's, it was, for me, it was like that wild balance that isn't quite in the middle, but it actually, it's like, if you're going to make a mistake, make that mistake.
Yeah, I love that.
Anyway, so that was, that what I've learned about gentleness is that it's better to be gentle than to be harsh, even if it doesn't work, because then you can play the harsh one afterwards if you have to. Not that you're going to be harsh, but you might have to use a boundary in a certain situation that you weren't before. So it's always good to lean on the side of gentleness, I feel, but especially towards ourselves, because it does open so many doors inside us, and it can open many doors outside us as well. So yeah, it's a great teaching, I think.
Yeah, I feel so too. I feel like we all have an inner voice that's, left unchecked, pretty rampant for most of us. And especially left unchecked and left rampant, I think it sort of starts to focus on that survival mechanism more than that thrival mechanism for reasons beyond. But I find, the gentleness piece gets me going, and I'm playing that sort of, I'm beating myself with the anvil. And now, like, having worked with this for a long minute, the art of contemplation, the humor emerges in it. On the other side of it, there's this, I'm doing that thing again. Just like, there you are, you old tyrant. Like, hello. And I can actually laugh, and that invokes me into more softening and more gentleness. And it's this really beautiful practice. And yeah, it really is a really warm and fuzzy invitation. And like you said, a door opener into it's just a whole new way of being with yourself. When you realize how much time and energy is spent with the inner narrative, and just keeping the intention of gentleness alive, and just contemplating gentleness. So that leads me to my last question, which today is about, we've talked a little bit about challenges emerging in our lives, things that we're inspired by, to sort of pull that into our contemplative practice, into our contemplative way, into our way of contemplation. But then we also have what the Gene Keys offer up as a hologenetic profile. So how does the hologenetic profile, how do we use, obviously I'm familiar with it, so how would you prescribe even just having one sort of key as a particular key for us? How do you weave that in with the art of contemplation? What is the role and the job of the hologenetic profile there? What is it doing? And I think that would sort of segue into those that are tuning in being excited to check out their hologenetic profile.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm aware also we've gone on a long time, so I want to be kind of compassionate towards the audience.
Thank you.
So yeah, I think, that's a whole new arena, but you could go to genekeys.com and get your free profile, and you'll have this profile that has all these words in it. And there's also a slider in there that's quite funny at the bottom, and you'll see and buttons you can switch on and off, and you'll see shadow and gift, and then another word called siddhi. Siddhi is a Sanskrit word meaning divine gift, right? And so you have all these layers of words in different bands, and you can turn them on and off. So they're for you to contemplate about yourself and your journey through working with the gene keys. And ideally, you would enter one of the programs that guides you step by step through one of these journeys, right? The first one is about purpose. The second one is about love. And the third one is about prosperity. And so you could take one of those journeys and go into your keys. And it's a wonderful journey. And you could do the online program or one of our live retreats. And you explore all those keys and what they mean for you, you know. And that's a journey. That's a months long journey. You know, in some cases, years, because you got to unpick those words. You got to understand them. You understand the keys and how they work and how to apply them to your life. And that's contemplation is the key. Contemplation is, you know, you take all this language of the gene keys and then you begin to contemplate it. But for the sake of just finishing this today, a nice thing that you could do if you're listening to this is just maybe pick one of those keys. Anyone you like, really, doesn't matter which one, and one of those words. And I suggest picking one of the words that sounds really nice, not one of the shadow ones. So pick one of those city words, one of those higher words, or a word that you feel really like you can relate to. Might be compassion, might be, you know, delight, might be, you know, devotion, or, you know, whatever it is. You pick one, and then you take that word and take it home with you. You know, take it and put it inside your heart. Take it like a homeopathic pill and just let it just dissolve inside you. Because if that word is there in your profile, then that word is somewhere inside you. It represents a quality of somewhere, of something in your DNA embedded in you at birth, you know. And so it's an algorithm. It's one of those things that's waiting to be awakened. So take it away and just contemplate it for just maybe do a week, you know, just give yourself don't be too hard on yourself. Just say, okay, for a week. And maybe you take that word and you write it on your bathroom mirror or on your desk and somewhere. And you just go, that's the word I'm going to contemplate for this week. And I'm going to contemplate me being that word this week. And I tell you, you will have an extraordinary week.
You really will.
You know, because you'll come and you'll forget about it, but it'll be in the back of your consciousness and it'll keep coming back. And you'll be like, compassion. Oh yeah. And there it is again. It pops up and you'll see it'll pop up, you know, and it'll pop up as a theme possibly for you, you know, and you may need it, you know, because something might come up and you may really need to go into that word and realize that word is a portal into some incredible quality that is part of your purpose for being here. And that's a very simple way of beginning a journey with the gene keys. And then you could, you know, embark on one of the programs, which is a more structured way into your keys and your words and really understanding them in depth and how they can help you. And even the shadows, how you can begin to see them in a new light and use their energy to give you uplift instead of letting them drag you down, you know. That's the nature. That's what it's all about, really. So, yeah, a little bit of homework, bit of fun. Hope you enjoy that.
Guys, I'm going to put a link to, like I said throughout the episode, link to how to get your hologenetic profile in the show notes below. Richard, I could thank you for your time here today, but honestly, I'd love to just acknowledge just a lifetime's work that's gone into you being able to inform this conversation, the body of work that you offer us so humbly, so gracefully. Really, really appreciate you and your walk in life. Thank you so much for everything, including this conversation.
Well, thank you, Amrit. It's a pleasure to be here and to meet you and to feel your delightful energy. So it's really great.
Hey guys, if you enjoyed this video, give it a like, leave us a comment. And if you want to stay in tune for the new episodes launching every Monday, hit subscribe and I'll see you in the next video. Stay inspired to evolve.